Guys, first off, Joey and where's Joey? There you are. Joey, Russ, thank you so much for having me. I love talking to groups like this. I love talking to rooms that are just high quality people, highly invested people, and high performing people. And I think something that we all have to come back to is that we are all put on this earth to be absolutely world class at something. There is something that makes us different inside. And that's nothing that we can choose. That's something that has been put a calling on our life. And what we are doing throughout this is trying to figure out what that is. And the one thing we have to realize is that the energy that we put out into this world, the existence that we have, ultimately determines how fast we get there and how we are able to then impact other people through that calling that exists. At 13 years old, all I thought I wanted to do was be a hockey player. You asked me, growing up in Canada, go through school and say, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'm going to play in the NHL. That's going to be what I'm going to be. That's what I'm going to do. And so at 13 years old, I was playing with 16 and 17-year-olds and really had like a bad string of games. And I was starting to get frustrated. I was the smallest guy. My father said to me, he said, son, talent will get you noticed, but consistency will get you paid. And we have to come back to that notion. I want you to think about that for a second. Payment is not in form of money. It could be, but payment is in form of fulfillment. Payment is in form of a scholarship. Payment is in form of getting into that room that you want. Payment is in form of building that family that you want. Payment is in form of being in a room like this. And consistency is the only thing that can get you there. So at that moment, at 13 years old, I started going, what do I have to do to become the most consistent version of myself? And that literally set the trajectory for the rest of my life. At 13 years old, I'm diving into heart rate monitors and blood pulse oximeters and medical journals and all of these things that I could do to figure out how do I become that most consistent version of me. It drove me through right to a hockey scholarship. It brought me down to the US, went through my undergraduate degree, went through my master's degree, went through my doctorate program, became the youngest strength coach in the NHL, was one of the youngest guys on staff with Team USA and Hockey Canada, going to the Olympics, all of these different things. But on the inside, I was empty. I hated who I was. I hated my job. I was going through divorces. I was going through one. I got divorced. I was as depressed as I could ever be. And all of a sudden, I figured that I wasn't serving the purpose that I was meant to serve. And it wasn't until I started to realize, what is my purpose? Why have I gone through all of this? And ultimately, it was to solve the problem of how do we take our bodies, our earthly vessels that have been placed here, to allow people like you, who are high-performing people who have a calling on your life to do something amazing, to do something great, to do something world-class, and allow you to magnify and ultimately intensify that impact on everybody else. Because every single one of you have that inside. I know, that's why you're here. And ultimately, to be able to do that, we had to be able to go through all of these items and these steps that allow you to show up with the greatest amount of energy to allow the greatest amount of impact. And so I say that and come through this as what I started to see at the NHL level was that, and at the pro sport level, was that we were taking our bodies, our earthly vessels for these men, for these women, and ultimately ended up killing these earthly vessels in the sense of a business. And I took a stand against it. It was something that I could no longer do from a value stance, a value drop. After 15 years of continuing to allow this to happen, be a part of this. And I took a stance and it cost me my job. I got fired. I was with the Anaheim Ducks and it cost me my job. Walked away, and as a 30-year-old, what is that, 27 years? Of trying to figure, or 17 years of trying to figure out what I wanted to do. The NHL is my pinnacle, having it taken away overnight. And so I say that, I'll kind of play this. I don't know if we can hear this.
Gotta get my shot, gotta go get this to numb this, gotta go do this to numb that. And
Start this again. So this was a documentary we did for 30 for 30 after I got fired. And after this came out, what our focus was here was to create a change in how athletes and everybody were handled, and how their bodies were utilized, and the effects that were happening. And we were seeing opiate use, Toradol shots, all of these things that's a warrior mentality, to just keep pushing through things to continue to serve. And a year after this came out, although it cost me my job, there was a movement done in the NHL to allow third-party and secondary options to Toradol and opiate use. So it created a change, it created a movement.
I hear guys all the time talk about that. Gotta go get my shot, gotta go get this to numb this, gotta go do this to numb that. And it's that warrior mentality, right? It's something that you love about hockey, and it's something that you hate about it at the same time if you really know and dig deep into it. That's a little messed up. There was this feeling that there's gotta be a better way. There's conversations that just weren't being had. The way that you're here to take on tomorrow, you're cut, you're traded. In the big scheme of things, longevity-wise, what are we doing to help these players? Because ultimately, they're the guys putting their lives and their livelihoods, let's put it that way, and their future lives, future selves in jeopardy every time they go into their sport. If we're not thinking about it, then who is?
So what we started to see was that these warriors would do whatever was taken to ultimately seek something that was glorified. And being able to work with these guys, the moment that they held that trophy overhead, the next day, they were the same person. They were a champion for a moment. And you go right back to it. And what I started to see is we started to see the same thing in this profession as I started to go out. We start to chase this. We start to chase everything. We chase money. Everybody in here, we're looking for passive income sources, but we're chasing this. We're chasing this. We're chasing this. We're chasing this. And ultimately, we've won the money game, but you've lost the game of life. And we have to decide whether we chase success or significance. And we put this up on a pedestal. Do I want to be successful or do I want to be significant? And I'm here to tell you that you can have both. Jeff Bezos, Tony Robbins, Mark Zuckerberg, Grant Cardone, all of whom have ultimately made a stance to say, hey, I'm no longer just going to chase financial success. I've tasted it, I've been there, but now I'm going to work on my earthly vessel, my body, because that's ultimately what's going to prevent me from making the impacts that I want to have. And as we move forward, you do not have to choose success or significance. You can have both. You can marry them. Because all of a sudden, we've started to realize that once our body fails us, it doesn't matter how much money we have in the bank. It doesn't matter how much income we have coming in on a passive way. And so success and significance can occur. Financial freedom and health optimization can occur. And ultimately, life is better this way. Life can exist this way. And that's what we call a life in ownership. And that's why I've been called to ultimately serve people in this industry. I've been called to serve you guys because you're the ones that are ultimately serving the greater good and the greater people. So I want to tell you two stories. Number one, about George W. Jenkins. Who's heard of George Jenkins? Nobody. So George Jenkins is the founder of Publix. Who's heard of Publix? Grocery store chain, everybody. Does anybody know how Publix was set up? How they operated? So George Jenkins always owned the land, always owned the real estate, always owned the building of his Publix store before he opened another one. And everybody who worked for George Jenkins was given stock and equity in Publix, which was why he was able to have the best teams. Because once you're working and you're a deli manager or a store operator or a retail clerk, a person, someone scanning up, you have equity in Publix. And so ultimately, as he grew to 972 stores, He owned every piece of land, every building, and ultimately the team succeeded along with that. Over the course of his life, he gave over $18 billion to charities. And on his deathbed, 88 years old, 1996, they allowed one reporter to come up into his room. And as he's getting all this interview done, he goes, Mr. Jenkins, thank you so much. Thank you so much for allowing me to come and do this last interview. And he says, Mr. Jenkins, what is one thing that you would tell me about success? He goes, son, you're asking the wrong question. And he goes, okay, Mr. Jenkins, what would you say? He goes, I'm sitting here on my deathbed, and you need to know I would have given any amount of money to have my health back. And then he goes, okay, Mr. Jenkins, how much would you have taken back from what you gave away to charities? And what would your net worth have been if you wouldn't have given all that money away? He said, I would have been worth nothing. Success and significance, you can have it both. This man right here, we took that picture 5 days ago. 5 days ago. I was just in Mexico hosting a retreat. Jesse Ecker and his wife were there. We had 16 couples down in Mexico working on relationships, working on business, working on our health. And this man right here, how many people have ever walked into a store and walked out and gotten home and you have this stupid security tag on your shirt? So this man, you can thank for that. He owns 283 patents on that. And he owns an ultimate, I think, of just shy of 500 patents total. He calls himself an inventor. Adele had a $4.8 billion business. At 41, he found himself with stage 5 pancreatic cancer, going through 16 surgeries over the course of 6 months, which you flip the coin to whether you go into the morgue or whether you're going back to the hospital. His wish coming out when he was cured, he goes, I earned my cancer. I earned where I was because I was so focused on making money. I was so focused on my business. And I earned ultimately what I got. He became a client about 6 months after that and has been with us ever since. And he goes, Justin, I cannot tell you how happy I am for the first moment and the first time in my life. I have money, I have financial freedom, and I have my health. And he goes, I have never been in a better situation. And all of a sudden we realize that healthy men, healthy women will have hundreds of goals. Unhealthy men, unhealthy women will have one. And when you have your health, you can make everything else work. And so I come back to this. If God gave us everything we pray for today, it would crush us. And thus, we need to prepare our vessels to be able to handle the blessings that are coming our way. Because I guarantee you, going back to the first thing I said, each and every one of you have a calling to be world-class at something, and it is going to happen. It's going to. But are you prepared to handle what is about to occur? We have people say, hey, I want to build $1 billion business. I want to build a $100 million business. I want to raise a fund worth $50 million. That's going to require you to travel. That's going to require you to be in 8 different cities over the course of a month. That's going to require you to have some long days. That's going to require you to do some things that right now, son, daughter, you're not ready to handle. That's going to kill you. That's going to leave you like Adele in this place. You have a massive calling on your life, but you're not ready to handle what's there. And so we have it upon ourselves to basically make this earthly vessel capable of handling everything that we are being called to do. And when we have that, man, life gets fun really freaking fast. And so I want to bring this into a motion here and into like a little model that we can ultimately bring into like comprehension, because it's like, okay, cool, I understand this, but what does health really mean? And I want to draw this model. I was going back and forth on this morning, and I want to bring some awareness to this. So it's what I call the fake health continuum. And this isn't in here, but can everybody see this? Yeah.
So the fake health continuum. On this side, we have ultimately death and sickness. This is where George Jenkins was. This is where Adele was. On this side, we have truly optimized. This is your Grant Cardones of the world. This is your Elon Musks now of the world. This is all these guys that have like truly optimized themselves, your Tom Brady's of the world. And what we found is that in the middle, we have this fake health. It's absence of disease, but presence of symptoms. Who here has trouble sleeping? Who here has cloudy brain? Who here has indigestion when they eat? Who here has energy fatigue in the middle of the day? Who here has body aches? Who here is like, will be going through their day and all of a sudden they have hot flashes or have some form of like body pain? Okay, we go through that. That is not normal. We're not meant to feel that way. And so what we started to see is this fake health slide further to the right, and this optimized space becomes smaller and smaller and smaller, meaning that death and sickness is hitting us at an earlier age. We've got 40-year-olds looking like 75-year-olds. We've got 55-year-olds having diseases of 70-year-olds. Not normal. And so what we've been set out to do is bring this optimized space further to the left and minimize this death and sickness space, and ultimately take this fake health and drive it further to the left as well. And so what this looks like is this model. Now, a lot of you guys are in real estate, correct? Yes. We understand this? So I want to bring this to something that we can kind of bring into play here. So number one, we're going to live into this holistic health, and I'm going to start in the aspect that we can relate to in this real estate model. So I want you to think of holistic health like the real estate space. Okay? What are we going to do the first thing when we think about whether we want to buy single family homes, whether we want to buy commercial properties, whether we want to buy Airbnbs? What's the first thing we're going to do?
Criteria.
Sorry, say it again.
Have criteria.
For sure, definitely. We're going to identify a space, right? Going to get really specific on what we want that space to be. Then what are we going to want to do after we figure that out? But sure, but we want to learn about the current market, right? We want to understand, hey, is it high? Is it low? Is it in demand? Is it not in demand? We're going to analyze the market. Once we analyze the market, we're going to identify, hey, are we going to go, should we buy? Should we back off? Should we lean in? Should we double down? Should we buy 5 of these? Should we get a big space or just a small one? Then we're going to start to take action. We're going to either buy it, we're going to sell some of our assets off, we're going to start renting it out, we're going to raise rents, we're going to lower rents, we're going to buy them, we're going to renovate. What stage do we have to be at? And then all of a sudden, if we just stayed on this same path, hey, I did deep homework on this market, big research on this marketplace that I was in 5 years ago, and I'm still doing the same thing. Do you think it's going to be valid today? Of course not. But yet we think that with our bodies. Yeah, I got a blood test 7 years ago. I got a blood test annually from a doctor that said, hey, it was good. How do we think? Like, our bodies are changing. Has 800,000 cellular mutations and cellular actions a minute. How do we not think that we should know what's going on a little bit more frequently? And so I want to dive into this. And so when we talk about holistic health, we have a mind-body contract. Okay, a mind-body contract. It's not mind and body, they're one. What happens psychologically manifests physically and vice versa. I'll say that again. What happens psychologically manifests physically and vice versa. You're stressed in your mindset, you're stressed in your psychological components of what's going on, you're going to feel that. You're going to feel that in your body, and it's going to manifest through tight shoulders. It's going to manifest through sore joints. It's going to manifest in poor sleep. It's going to manifest in disease that's being created internally. When our mind is at dis-ease, it creates dis-ease. And so we've got this mind-body contract. How do we measure this? Well, thank you for asking. Heart rate variability, you've probably heard about this. Okay, I went and got my PhD in sleep, heart rate variability, and recovery science. Why? Because everything that I started to see that was happening from working with these top-end athletes was that it had nothing to do with how we were training. It had nothing to do with how much we lifted in the weight room or how much speed work we did or how much power work we did. It had everything to do with how we recovered.
Yeah.
And the unique thing about heart rate variability is that it's a language. And it's a language that's basically talking about how our body is handling stress and strain. That's what it is. It's telling us literally how our body is adapting to the stressors that are being placed on us. And our body doesn't know the difference between mental, physical, spiritual, or emotional stress. How about that? How about that? You could be trying to close a $150 million deal, staying up all night, back-to-back Zoom calls, talking with investors, going through everything that Jesse just talked about, getting on a podcast, worried about getting on a podcast, worried about getting guests, worried about what is going to happen in terms of closing that. Or you could go for a 20-mile run and the stressors your body feels are the exact same. Comprehend that for a moment. And yet we just continue to keep stacking and stacking and stacking and stacking stressors and expect our bodies just to be able to perform and handle everything. And so we created another model that looks like this. Right here, what we call this overreaching. Right here, we call this regeneration. We do a great job of overreaching, an amazing job through our business, through our social life, through our families, through our workouts that we do, but we do a terrible job of spending time in this regeneration space. Sleep, nutrition, hydration, environment, immune function, mindset, self-care. What are those? What are those to us? And so this is why 90% of people live in this lower right quadrant, which we call burnout, and ultimately are operating at 60% of their true capabilities. And we wonder why we always feel like we're chasing the bucket, because we haven't been able to lean into what our true capabilities are. But when we create this segmented rhythm between overreaching, really stressing ourselves, staying up maybe a couple nights a week to get that deal done, but then focusing on a couple meditations during the day, focusing on a couple breath works, focusing in and getting our lift in, focusing on quality nutrition, making sure that we make hydration a priority throughout the day, making sure that we have a cutoff so that we're spending time with our families and operating in that sense. We actually get everything done in a much better way because we perform in this upper right quadrant, which is called ownership. Performance cannot be optimized. Write this one down. Performance cannot be optimized until health is optimized. Health is the ultimate performance enhancer. Health is the ultimate performance enhancer. And so when we come back to the sciencey side, I'll be here for 30 seconds, is in between these heartbeats, we have time intervals. In between these heartbeats, we have time intervals. And based on the variance, 792 milliseconds, P1, person 1 is up here, person 2 is down here. Based on these time intervals between, you see 792 to 900, these are milliseconds, 792 milliseconds, 900 milliseconds, 645, say 720 versus 900, 911, 900, 911. The more variant, the more time variance between, the more parasympathetic we are, meaning more relaxed, less stress. Think loosey-goosey. But the more regimented, the higher stress. Because our bodies are set up to have a protective mechanism that's like, oh my God, our heart is the most important thing. So our mind starts to regulate the way our heart beats. And so a higher HRV, meaning higher variant intervals between, means our bodies have a greater adaptation to the stress and strain and a higher parasympathetic activity, so a higher relaxation activity. Versus a lower HRV, 20, 25, 30, we have a lesser adaptation to stress and a higher sympathetic activity, a higher stress activity, meaning we are less optimized to be able to take on stress, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. The last thing I'll draw here, and I love this model as well, is we come back to this and we see this traditional stair-step model. We wake up in the morning, we take the kids to school, we get breakfast on the table, we have back-to-back Zoom calls all day, we go and get a quick workout in, we scarf down lunch, we forgot to drink water, we get a drink of water, we go back, we go take grandma to her appointment that we have to, we come back, we try to close a deal, the deal falls through, we go pick up the kids from school, we take them to soccer, we go and grab dinner on the way home at a fast food joint, and then we plop down to bed. It's just from here straight up in old stress category. But the moment that we figure out that all of a sudden we can go climb and relax, climb and relax, climb and relax, and we can do it in a very periodized way throughout the day, we all of a sudden gain this massive capacity. So if I sit here and I say to somebody, hey, here's a cup. I want you to go out into the rain and bring me as much water back as you can. How much could you bring me back?
Well, what?
A cup, exactly. But all of a sudden, use this model and you stress and recover, stress and recover, stress and recover throughout the day, you just increase your capacity. I'll give you this. How much water can you bring me back now? 5 of those. Not because you have all of a sudden reorganized the wheel, but because you've increased your capacity to handle stress. And ultimately, you've added years to your life to be able to serve. It's another model I like to talk about when we talk about increasing capacity and resiliency. We have to focus on the physical side, these habits we talked about, to increase the size of that bucket, which ultimately impacts mental and emotional side. And lastly, the purpose and spiritual side. But to make it sustainable, to mean something that is not something you did for a month or a year or 3 months, it has to be so tied to that purpose, that spiritual intention of what are you doing and why, so that it becomes a lifestyle. And this becomes cyclical. And when this becomes cyclical, it's just like the hurricane that's hitting Florida right now, it becomes massive. It becomes scary because it's your God-given purpose of what you're doing for you to be able to do that. And you will not allow yourself not to perform in some of these physical metrics and some of these behavior changes throughout the day, because you know if you're not doing that, you're not going to be able to serve in the way you want. You're not going to be able to look after your kids in the way you want. You're not going to be around to serve them in the way that you want. You're not going to be able to dive into your not-for-profit the way you want. You're not going to be able to serve the underprivileged the way you want. You're not going to be able to do all of these things that you have set up for the goals that you guys are establishing. But the moment you tap into this, oh, look out. That is a dangerous, dangerous man or woman, and that is exciting. And so number two, we figured out what we want. We figured out why we're doing this. We're now going to dive into testing and analyzing. So from a testing side, we want to go into getting really specific, because each and every one of you is different. Each and every one. What works for me won't work for Sharon, won't work for us. And so we start to understand our DNA and epigenetic makeup. We understand our cellular micronutrient deficiencies. We understand our glucose and insulin functions. We understand our antioxidant and anti-inflammatory capacities, our lipid panels, our cortisol testing, our hormone testing, our gut biome paneling, our hydration testing. And ultimately, that's why when we hear things of like, oh, go get your NAD drips, go get your TRT, go do your stem cells, all awesome. Not awesome for all of us today. It could be great. It could be awesome. But what happens when we haven't looked after the personalized lifestyle adjustments? It's just, let's feel good for 2 weeks and then have us go right back to the way that we were. It's basically like saying, hey, I know I'm in the single family home business. The commercial real estate must be the same. I'm just going to go drop down 150 million on this place because the single family home market's really good. Wrong. You might get lucky. It might work for you, but repeatedly long-term, it's not going to work. And so we got to test and we got to analyze, okay? Figure out what is happening internally so we can take actions to make sure that we can increase our capacity to serve. And then we make bespoke adjustments, okay? We make specific adjustments to our diet and tolerances. Can you eat something? Can you drink something? Is there something better for you? We're all going to eat. We're all going to drink. We're all going to sleep. We're all going to exercise. Why in our busy lives are we going to go and waste our time and not do something that's more pinpointed for you so that you can get maximal benefit from that? And so when we start to understand our diet and tolerances, the supplementation, personalized formulation, so that, hey, I don't have to take 19 different things. I can take one thing that's curated to me based off what my deficiencies are, so that ultimately I can reverse those. I can have more energy. I can show up more effectively. I can have a deeper sense of self and operate at a higher level. I ask Sharon this all the time. I said, Sharon, with everything that you've done, with everything that you've operated, what percentage of you would you say you're operating at? Or call you out.
15%.
15%. 15%, and I'm able to sell a company for $4 billion. What happens if I'm operating at 60 or 70 or 80 or heaven forbid 90? You end up like George Jenkins. You end up like Adele. And so we get really pinpointed and specific, and we start taking action on this. We start making lifestyle choices. We start taking lifestyle decisions. We start creating new routines, new habits, new structures. Not because going and doing a HIIT workout is amazing. Not because going and cold plunging in the morning is amazing. Not because going and sitting in a sauna or having red light or doing a meditation in the middle of the day is what these other people do. No, it's because it's what matters for me. It's what connects me to my higher purpose. It's what connects me to that. I need a pen. It's what connects me to that inner circle right here, so that I can get into flow states faster and faster and faster and stay there longer and ultimately make my work mean more. And then we repeat. 4 months later, we go back through the same thing. We reanalyze. The market's changed. Our bodies have changed. Oh, the deficiencies I had before are gone. But you know what? I've got 2 other ones that I have to manifest now, because our bodies will adapt to the lowest levels in which they are constrained. And if all of a sudden the lowest level of constraint goes away, something new becomes the lowest level of constraint. How much energy can we add to our day? Not how can we add a day, but how much energy can we add to this? So that ultimately we can realize that God-given potential, because we all have a calling on our lives. We all have something that we are meant to be world-class at. And when we lean into that in a spiritual and powerful way, oh boy, look out. Not hell or high water is going to change or impact the ability for you to be able to ultimately lean into that in a deep, deep way. And so as you guys go forward, I hope this just causes you to think a little bit differently. Think about how you're operating today, and think, hey, you know what? I can probably lean into this a little bit more. I can probably get 1% better. Yeah. I can probably take myself and the impact that I've already created and the legacy that I want to leave for my kids, for my family, for everybody else that exists here. And I want to leave that 10x, not just in a bank account and a trust fund, but how long mom and dad are around. How long mom and dad are here to see the grandkids, to see the great grandkids, to have these experiences that we all want to lean into. We talk about creating time freedom. What's time freedom if you just got to go sit in a hospital? What's time freedom if you got to send your kids off to go have a vacation on your dime while you're sitting at home because you can't travel? What's time freedom if all of a sudden you can't go and participate in the things that you really want to because you're restricted because of your health, which is something that you could ultimately have controlled 5, 10, 15, 25 years ago? It's an amazing thought. It's a sobering thought. But it's something that each and every one of us have the opportunity to lean into today to create a better tomorrow for not just us, but for everybody else in our life. And so just like financial freedom has a big impact, so does our health freedom. And that is an exciting, exciting thing and an exciting moment. So that's our Instagram. That's our website. I'm here to serve. I'm here to ask questions or answer questions, because ultimately, I want you guys to lean into that. I want you guys to find that passion and that space that's in each one of you, because you wouldn't be in this room. You wouldn't invest 4 days if it didn't mean something to you. You wouldn't invest all this time, energy to come out to Scottsdale and enjoy this camaraderie in this space that Russ and Joey have so graciously created to ultimately figure out how you guys can have these bigger, more significant lives, but also success. Success and significance are not on separate levels. You can't have both. And it's just there in the decision that's one step away. That's awesome.
Talking about the periodic kind of training and saying, hey, work and then rest and work and rest. Is there like a framework formula for that? Like, you know, work for 2 hours, take 20 minutes?
So it's a great question. And anybody tells you that, BS.
It's personalized.
100% personal.
Yeah.
Like, there's people that I know, clients that I know, that all of a sudden they'll dive in for 6 hours and be so on it, but they have to take an hour, hour and a half and just kind of go blow it up. Then there's others that all of a sudden will say, hey, I'm going to do 2-hour increments and I feel great. There's others that have built capacities to go and push for 5 days and then be able to come off and come off the engine. I mean, I don't say this as like in like a bragging feat, but how many people would like the energy in which I just blew into this?
Yeah.
Would you believe me if I said that's the 14th talk I've given in 5 days? 14th talk I've given in 2 different countries, in 3 different cities, on 4 different time zones. That's it. That's true. I was just pouring into 30 couples for 6 days. And then I flew, I was in Florida State working with Florida State football and Florida State men's and women's basketball. Gave 5 talks on Monday with the same passion, same energy in every single thing. All of a sudden, got on a 6-hour flight or 6 a.m. flight yesterday, came out here, gave a talk yesterday afternoon virtually. All of a sudden, spoke today. I'm going to fly out on a red eye tonight. Going to go to New York City, going to speak at Rutgers and then Princeton. Then going to fly from there to Pittsburgh, going to work with the Steelers and the Penguins. Then going to fly back to Miami, going to work with the Dolphins and the Hurricanes before I go home finally on Saturday afternoon, in which I'll take Sunday off to recuperate. And Monday night I fly out on my honeymoon to Vietnam. And that is, and you look at it, you look at my HRV and it's consistently up, it's consistently going. Why? Because I have my protocols and I know what it is that I need to lean into. I know what I need to do for myself. And it's not selfish. It's not selfish. Because guess what? Who's seen this meme where you've got this person on this side? I'm sorry, I went on a tangent off of what you want question. You've got this person on this side and they're taking a puzzle piece out of them and putting it into somebody else to make them complete. Who's seen that meme? Okay? And they say that is the most selfless person. And they've got holes. I'm like, that is not the most selfless person. That is the most selfish person. Because guess what? That person that's taking this to put it into somebody else with barely anything left, there's 50 other people that are asking for a puzzle piece and they have nothing left to give. Rather, the most selfless person is that's handing out puzzle pieces and then saying, hey, I need a second to puzzle piece myself back together and then go and lean back in. That's it. And when you can be that person, your reach becomes exponentially greater. Exponentially greater. And those that you are serving are also going and serving people. So you pour into somebody all of a sudden, we're pouring into you guys. You guys are going to go and pour into your audiences. From there, they're going to go and pour into their audiences. And it's an exponential growth. You guys are going to realize all of a sudden, you don't even know who you are impacting. We're going to impact here. We're going to go and impact thousands from here. Just because of things that you've heard or things that you've done or things that you've leaned into. So back to your answer, there is no one way to figure this out. There is no one framework or protocol to go off of. But what you have to realize is nobody is a robot. Nobody has the capability to just put the pedal to the metal and keep going forever, unless you're willing to sacrifice the quality of work, the level of brain capacity in which you're able to give to something, and ultimately the outcomes that you're willing to go. So something to kind of go off of is figure out when your best work is done, and then ultimately give yourself what I say is a 30-minute self-care window every single day. And we call it building a parasympathetic buffet. What is it that you love to do for yourself? I'm a story guy. Tell one story. So we've got a client. He's a New York Times bestseller. He's got 14 of them. He's written 32 books. He's working on his 33rd. It'll come out next month called One Truth. So you figure out who it is. He said, he goes, Justin, I'm just struggling to write this book. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And I said, what's something that you only do for you? That's the definition of self-care. Something you only do for you. So it's not taking the kids to soccer. It's not walking the dog. It's not any of these things. It's something you only do for you. I said, what's something you only do for yourself? He goes, water ski. Love water ski. I said, when's the last time you water skied? He goes, 2 years ago. I said, dude, you live on a lake with a boat with a water ski. He's like, yeah, it's just been super busy. I said, okay, for the next 2 weeks, I want you to find 3 days a week to go on water ski. He goes, there's no way I can do that. I said, okay, fine, then don't write the book. He goes, okay, fine, I'll figure it out. And so, first day he goes on water skis, does his thing, comes back in, calls me, goes, you're an idiot. There's nothing happening here. I just wasted an hour of my day. I said, okay, cool. When's the next one? He goes, tomorrow. I said, awesome. Went out and water skied again. Comes back, he goes, well, it was fun, but nothing's happening. I said, okay, cool. When's your next water ski? He goes, Friday. I said, cool, awesome, sounds good. Call me then. He doesn't call me that day. I'm like, okay, mustn't have gone. Blew it off. Calls me Saturday in tears. He goes, Justin, you won't believe it. He goes, I was on the boat, I was on the water yesterday. My water ski turned from an hour to 5 hours. All of a sudden I got off, I came back in, and I wrote my book. I wrote my book while I was water skiing, and then I sat down and I just wrote. I wrote all night. And he goes, the book's done. The book's out, the book's done, the book's in. Because when we can connect with ourselves, when we can truly connect to that purpose that exists, and all it is about finding time to have white space and connect to what matters, and that's that self-care moment, and that's where we're going to do it. And so back to your point, it is literally about starting with 30 minutes a day. It could be 2 15-minute blocks. It could be 10 3-minute blocks. It could be 6 5-minute blocks. But give yourself 30 minutes a day in whatever intervals, whatever action items you need, so that ultimately you can go and figure out how to create that space for yourself. So that would be my answer without an answer. Yeah.
This might be a little bit direct question for you, but so when I look at my HRV compared to the group, like my HRV is consistently dramatically lower than everyone else.
Mhm.
I'm in like 20 to maybe like a 25 or a 30 range. That's my bar.
Mhm.
And when looking at the information you provided, the higher the number,
Mhm.
but yet I'm always in that, or correction, for now,
Yeah.
I find myself consistently in that bracket.
It's a great question. So what we have to figure out is we have to find out what's constraining you. Because what that's telling us is HRV is a language. And what that language is communicating to us is, hey, what's your name?
Mark.
Mark, your body's basically saying, hey, Mark, there's some form of stressor, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, that is chronic, that is constant, that's keeping you in this upper left quadrant that is ultimately driving you downwards, that's not allowing you to perform here. And so we have to figure that out. Is it something that you're eating that you don't know about because you've got some form of micronutrient deficiency that your body's constantly trying to reverse, but because it's doing that, it's pulling from all these other things? Is it maybe that you're not getting the quality of sleep you need? Maybe you're getting the time that you need, but not the depth of sleep, not the quality of sleep. And because of that, your body's chronically trying to redirect that stress that's happening there. And so because we know your body's communicating that there is not this level of rebound, you're functioning, you're still going, you're not gonna die. But what it's saying is that, hey, there's a stressor on my body that's chronic, and we have to figure out what that is in order to replicate that and change it so that you can go and see these recovery modalities. We've seen people go from chronic 20s, chronic 30s to consistent 80s and 90s. We've seen these changes, but it takes change. We live in this society, we live in this culture where it's like, hey, you know what? I really want this, but I really don't want to do what it takes to get that. Right? And so change requires choosing different. Change requires choosing different in all these different capacities. And as we go through that, wouldn't it be amazing if we knew exactly what we had to change? Let's do it. And so that's why I said we go through this testing protocol. We go through these deep intrinsic understandings, not just of the physical component, but of the mental component, the emotional component, and spiritual component as well. Because again, I'll go through a little story here. We've seen it both on the athletic side and the entrepreneurial side. We've got entrepreneurs that are in back-to-back Zoom calls. They're crunching, trying to raise money. They're crunching, trying to finish the stuff up. They're crunching, trying to get the funding for this new real estate value. And the HRV will go from 85 to 17. Just from the stress emotionally, mentally, and spiritually that's on them for this one project. Conversely, they're also a triathlete. And they go and run a triathlon over the course of a weekend on a Saturday, and they come back Sunday, and they went from an 85 to a 17. The exact same look as when they were trying to do that race. Nothing physical happened. Mental, physical, spiritual, emotional. Your body doesn't know the difference between those stressors, and thus we have to identify where the chronic stressors are so that we can ultimately create and eliminate that lowest common denominator so that we can thrive. I hope that helps.
I know you probably will say that it depends on the body and the person. Well, I don't know that. I assume that might be part of it. But if you can give kind of a general answer on this, coffee. A lot of us, that's how we get our energy.
It's more just a habit. Psychological habit. So
it doesn't really give you energy, right?
So that
it's true that it doesn't really give you energy, right? It just makes you think.
So it's a loaded question. So what happens when you drink coffee is it basically blocks the beta cells in the brain that ultimately blocks out tryptophan, melatonin, and serotonin. And so what happens is this is what we call a caffeine depression. That's why you may have a hard time sleeping or getting into deep stages of sleep. Caffeine in all of our bodies, if you are, and this is why we do DNA and epigenetic testing, is if you are a responder, if you have the responding gene to caffeine, you'll digest coffee or metabolize coffee in about 6 hours is the half-life in your body. So say you take in 200 milligrams of caffeine at noon, 6-hour half-life, at 6 p.m. you'll have 100 milligrams active. At midnight, you'll have 50 milligrams active. At 6 a.m., you'll have 25 milligrams active. And so that's if you're a metabolizer. If you're not, which you can find out through DNA and epigenetic information, it'll be closer to 8 to 10 hours. So there's possibility that you're actually never getting caffeine out of your system and it's just chronically going. We've all had that feeling where we have 1 cup of coffee for 6 months and all of a sudden 1 becomes 2 and then 2 becomes 4 and 4 becomes an espresso and then an espresso becomes a Red Bull and then we got a 6-hour energy or 24-hour energy, whatever the heck they're called. And we just get into this cyclical circuit where in actuality, if we actually figured out what creates energy is eliminating those least power of resistance, and we can actually replace or change the micronutrient deficiencies that we have, change how our body's absorbing the nutrients that we're taking so we can ultimately be replicated in the deepest way. We can actually change the way our circadian rhythm is optimizing so we can get into deeper stages of sleep, which will allow us to wake up more rested, which will allow us to wake up with more energy because now we get into what we call the cortisol melatonin cycle. And the cortisol melatonin cycle, let's see if I can do this well, looks something like this. It's inverse. So if this is cortisol, this is melatonin. Melatonin is lowest first thing in the morning when we wake up. Cortisol is highest, meaning we're getting the most energy. Conversely, melatonin should be highest as we're going to bed at night, and cortisol should be lowest when we're here, which is why, guess what? If you're working right up until the moment you go to sleep, if you're on any type of blue light, if you're getting in fights with your spouses, and your kids, jacking up cortisol. Cortisol and melatonin are like oil and water. You can't both have them at highest at the same time, so melatonin's going to plummet. You might still be able to go to sleep at night, but you're not getting into those deep stages of sleep. So even though you're getting 7 hours of sleep, you're not getting 7 hours of quality sleep, and it doesn't rate the same. And so we wake up in the morning and we go through this same cycle because melatonin dropped. All of a sudden it's like, I'm a little confused. So melatonin will rise first thing in the morning. We wake up groggy, what we call the melatonin hangover. Who's ever taken melatonin, woken up in the morning and be like, I just got hit by a truck. Anybody? Yeah. It's because melatonin is high in the morning. So all of a sudden we take that cup of coffee to get us going, block the beta blockers. We now all of a sudden have these depression states over the course of the day because we're blocking serotonin and dopamine from coming into our body and these hormonal changes that are occurring that we've put ourselves through, and that starts a vicious cycle. So, in saying that, I like coffee. However, I don't like it. I don't like it for everybody. Do you drink it? No. I've never had a cup of coffee in my life. If I did, I'd be in the rafters. This energy nobody could handle. But I also have the gene that ultimately creates massive amounts of anxiety. And so I have anxiety when I drink coffee and I start to have heart palpitations. If I have heart palpitations, I have the gene that ultimately increases my likelihood for heart attack. when I'm exercising or when I'm moving. So we can determine those things and help to create these changes that help facilitate this. So to your answer, I like coffee for some people, for some things, at some times. But I want to know more information as to why and when we use it. We use it as a tool rather than as a habit mechanism. And when we use it intentionally, all of this testing, all of these things, all the things we do is to increase intentionality of how we act on a given day. Just like we go back to why are we purchasing this property? Why are we investing in these things? We don't just throw $100,000 at something or $500,000 at something. We want to do it in a very intentional and purposeful way so that we get the outcomes that we want. But yet we think that our bodies, we can just throw whatever we want into it and should just create change. And so, to your point, yes, coffee is great if we use it at the right time in the right way, and we figure out when it is. If you're a high metabolizer of coffee, then great, yeah. Have a cup of coffee at 9 a.m. in the morning after you've woken up, gotten some movement, had some water in, taken your salt properly so that your body can now start absorbing, see the sunlight, take a couple deep breaths, and you're like, oh man, I actually don't need my coffee. Or 9 o'clock, you get your coffee because you're like, I want it, it feels good. And it's something that makes me feel better. And it's not something I need in order to function, but rather something I do out of intentionality. And I've got a curfew on it so that I know that come 7, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, I can fall asleep and get into those deeper stages that will help me in a new circadian rhythm to optimize my clock and how I'm purposefully living.
And you answered that with one breath, man.
I don't know how I did it.
You think he can swim to the end of the?
Yeah.
So you kind of talked a little bit about the testing that's involved in everything. Can you just give sort of an overview of what it looks like and is involved when somebody works? How do you work with people?
Yeah,
Is it
so
remote? Is it?
Yeah, so everything's remote, so everything literally gets sent right to you. So it shows up in a nice big beautiful box. This is a spit test. These are all blood testing, which we send a phlebotomist right to your home to pull everything. And then this is a spit test, and this is the beautiful one. It's a poop test. And so we get those done. Everything gets sent back all at once. It gets processed by our lab. Our docs oversee everything and look at everything, and then our RD team meets with our doctoral team and basically takes a look and goes, what's your name? Jeff. And takes a look and go, okay, what does Jeff's body look like internally? What's his actualized goal look like? What does his day-to-day look like? And then we start working with you on a bi-weekly, monthly cadence to help formulate and create these habit changes that are purposeful and intentional for you. Everything from, like we talked about here, your hydration changes, your supplementation changes, your exercise changes, your recovery changes. How do we, if you're going and traveling from Miami to Scottsdale and you've got a 3-hour time change, how do we optimize your circadian rhythm to create these changes so that you're not all of a sudden wired up until 1 o'clock in the morning and then exhausted when you wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning because you think it's 6 and you've gotten 4 hours of sleep and it's an absolute disaster. And so that's what our team helps to do to continue to formulate that. And we'll do this happens once. This happens once, maybe twice a year, depending on what we see in the first one. But these will happen quarterly to make sure that we can, again, take a look at what's happening internally within your body so that we can then optimize those changes in a very purposeful and intentional way.
Okay, and then you said sort of like a bi-weekly check-in or adjustment or something like that. Does that like continue at that rate, or does it like decrease as you get further into it and you get things optimized? Or
depends on what level of program you're in, but yes, it can be as often as bi-weekly and you're obviously creating a relationship with that coach on the back end. And the unique thing about our team is that there's nothing wrong with this, but they're not like weekend warrior health coaches. This has been like their expertise. We've got a team of 30 that are either functional medicine doctors, RDs, or doctoral candidates in some form of health field that have come in and wanted to ultimately be here for the same goal, the same common goal, which is to shrink that fake health optimization space and open up this side. So
and then you're consistently working with the same coach.
Exactly.
Okay, and then with everything that's going on here, is this considered a replacement that.
We
or
s- we
work
still-
in conjunction with it.
Yeah, we still suggest that you have your primary, and that's simply to take a look at if you need you wake up with I don't know, bronchitis one day and you need an antibiotic. I mean, we're not going to write that for you. You're going to just be able to go to that. You break an arm, you're going to go see your primary for whatever it is.
Yeah, in those cases, but I mean, it's
Jeff, you just buy a new insurance policy every year, it's not very physical, and then come to you.
So just think about
15 years, it works for me for.
So just think about this as like, yes, in terms of there's a lot of people that we have that once they're optimized and looking through this, they everything that you're starting to see from your doc is they're not looking at cellular numbers, they're looking at blood serum numbers. The difference between that is manifestation of disease, manifestation of cellular adaptation happens at the cellular level, not in the blood serum. So when you start to create these types of changes, you're ultimately going to see the changes that they're looking at your physicals anyways.
They treat diseases, y'all prevent disease.
That's exactly it.
And when you're a client, you get a cool water bottle. Oh, dude, someday.
What, can I hate to ask you this, but, what's the investment?
Depends. Yeah, it depends. It's anywhere from $1,500 a month to $4,000 a month. If you
Just depends on your results, basically.
I know it depends on like the program you want to come into. Depends on if like are we putting a private chef in your home that we're ultimately determining what they cook for you. Are we ordering your meals regularly? Are we creating that supplementation formula for you? Like, is it done for you, or is it done with you, or is it information that you are able to then take? We give you a guidance and you go run with it. Like there's those different parameters that we lean with, but you're able to kind of lean in those different spaces. Yeah.
Looking at the graph that you had of the different concentric circles, one physical at the big one, and then spiritual, and purpose at the bottom. You obviously had the physical dialed in from an early age on, and then you had to find the mental side later. But then you work with people on both sides. Do you feel like it is, and I know it goes both ways and they build, but do you find it harder to work with somebody who's physically dialed in and mentally and purpose driven off, or easier to work with somebody who's physically way off the reservation but their mental purpose is on point? Or do you find that never happens if they're both not done it? You understand my question? Like,
Yeah. So
who's your harder client? I guess is more a thing. Like, is it work on the physical to get to the purpose, or hey, dude, like let's work on your brain and then we can worry about the body later? That kind of thing.
I'm gonna say it's equally challenging, and when I say equally challenging, it's an equal challenge for each, because for the person who's dialed in physically, quite frankly, they're probably dialed in physically because there's a whole bunch mentally going on that's the only thing that there is.
It's all the control line they have.
Exactly. So what all of that other stuff is happening, and what we call is inner and outer energy. And so we talk about that mind-body contract. Is you can't work with us on just the physical side. We're going to have you on the inner energy side too. We're going to have you on the mindset side, because that is what takes you from like incremental changes that you've been doing for a month, 2 months, 3 months to like, I'm never stopping this ever again, because I'm now on fire. I've literally lit this fire inside me that is like an absolute inferno, and that's what I'm going to move forward with. Conversely, you've got this person who's completely on purpose, but is just so engulfed in this that their bodies and physically, in terms of their habits and everything, they've just completely forgotten. It's like, okay, we have to now get you to trust the fact that by putting some time and effort and attention to this, it's only going to 100x what you're doing from this purpose.
Right, instead of taking it away.
And so it's equally challenging in terms of, and I don't want to say equally challenging, it's an equal challenge for us, because again, everybody's journey is going to be different, but each one are fun because there's another level of intentionality. And once you find what clicks for each person, it's all different. It gets turned on in a new way.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What kind of travel that you're going to keep, how do you, with how important diet is, do you basically do all your own meal prep and stuff like that, or do you have to have cheat days? How does it work?
Yeah, so great question. Are you basically asking like, how have I prepared myself for these 2 weeks?
Yeah, as a sample size.
Yeah. So a lot of it comes back to intentionality and doing things on purpose. And what I mean by that is, for example, when I left
when I left Cancun on Sunday, I knew what my meals needed to be, so had a salad at the tuna for lunch. I knew we were getting on a 5 p.m. flight, and so I got a wrapped it up, put it in my bag, took a nut mixture, threw it in my bag, so I had everything I needed. We landed at 10 p.m. I'd already had dinner. I didn't need to go home and eat in the fridge when I got home. I'm satisfied. It's great. I'm able to go lay down in my bed, fall asleep by 11, wake up at 4:30 the next morning so that I could go. Before I went to bed, I made sure that I had some protein bars, some fruit, and a protein shake ready so that when I woke up in the morning, grabbed it all, threw it in my bag, walked onto the plane, and ultimately taking a 5-hour flight out here with a 3-hour time change, 3-hour time zone change, I was able to have my protein shake when I felt like it. I had my fruit with me. I had my nut mixtures with me. I had my bars with me. So I landed here, and all of a sudden I'm ready for lunch. I go and have lunch. I'm not thrown off anymore. I'm right back on it. I get some exercise in as soon as I land here, so that again my body comes back to the circadian rhythm space. We went for dinner last night. Had again vegetables at the appetizer. Had my salad. Had my fish. Really light. Didn't eat really heavy, so that we had dinner at what time was it? 7 o'clock last night. So it was really 10 for me. So it's later than usual. But I ate really light. I didn't have a steak. I didn't have chicken. I had fish. So something really light that my body digests pretty easily. Went home, fell asleep, woke up this morning, knowing that I'm only here for 24 hours. Woke up this morning at 7 a.m. Eastern time, so 4 a.m. here. Stayed on that cadence, got some work done this morning, got my workout in as normal. So again, I'm on circadian rhythm. I'm on that pace. And then tonight, I'll get on a flight at 11 p.m. I'll sleep all night. I've got the laugh, but I've got my sleep kit with me. So I'll get on the plane. I'll throw this on tonight. This is my cooling sweater that I throw on. It's got a built-in mask. So I'll throw my hoodie over top of my head. I'll throw this over my ears. I'll throw my earplugs in, and I'll fall asleep at 11:30 on the plane, and I'll wake up at 7 a.m. when we're landing in New York City, and I'll be ready to go. And that's how I stay on, by being very intentional about what I do and don't leave anything to chance.
Where'd you get that?
We put them together. So yeah. And so that's and the other thing, like I talk about, is all of a sudden, like we talk about traveling with supplements, is like, hey, this is what I travel with. I'll throw it in my water bottle first thing in the morning. I'll shake it up with my protein, and I've got everything I need. I've got this, I've got my snacks, I've got my sleep kit, and away we go. We're done. But it's living on purpose, living intentionally. And that's literally how you just continue to make it work. Because if we want to do great things, if we want to do amazing things, we want to live epic lives. We can't treat our bodies how the average person does.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
We have to do great things. We have to have great habits. And guess what? We can be great because greatness made us.
Yeah.
I worked with Justin and I met a year ago. We went to his retreat, my wife and I, in March. It was amazing. And I just gotta say, like, if you're not working with somebody like Justin, it's like playing Battleship. But when you work with Justin, you get to turn the board around and you know where it is. You're just not shooting in the dark. Like, literally, if you're taking the time to come here and focus on your financial picture, and you're not taking the information that's readily available and figuring out, hey, I already know what to do. It's like knowing what to invest in. It's going to produce X return before it does it. It eliminates so much uncertainty. So anyway, if anyone has any questions, like, I'm happy to share an answer.
Get that word.
Do you have anything that, well, maybe I should back up. What is the age group where you should, can kids, teenagers work on something like this?
It's a great question.
Or is that too young?
So our target demographic that like 99.9% of our clients work into, but let's leave our athletes out of this because our professional athletes are 18 to 37, 38 years old.
But in this area, we usually have our clients between 30 and 55. That's where 30 and 60. That's where a lot of our clients fall. Now, what we end up seeing is the exact same question happens. Is like, hey, how can I do this for my family? And we start to see this a lot, and Crystal attested this. That was one of the biggest things that came out of the retreat is that, hey, I not only learned how to do this for me, but now I'm going to do this for my kids. And so you can do a DNA and epigenetic test to see what your kids' deficiencies are, what they're predisposed to in those ways. A DNA and epigenetic test, we have to understand, especially one that we run, we're not looking at where you came from and what your ancestry did and all this other crap. This is just all about marketing. We're looking at, hey, what are we deficient in nutritionally? What is it that we have that creates inflammation? What do we have that have food sensitivities? What do we have that we have potential micronutrient, mineral, and phytonutrient gaps in? And from there, we're able to make actual choices in an intentional way. So instead of feeding your kids Fruit Loops and peanut butter for breakfast, which is like, hey, they like it, we can go and hide it and create an acai bowl with a little bit of spinach and kale in it that they can't even taste. And we do it on purpose because they run a potential to be deficient in vitamin A and B12. Or we can have a different dinner that we've been having and focus more on like these higher quality proteins that maybe they're deficient in and not getting enough of. Or maybe we can make sure that they're having some higher complex carbohydrates that we wouldn't have thought about before. And so these things we can really do to do that. From a blood testing standpoint, I mean, it's how old can they tolerate needles? And so for our youngest kids that we've had, it's probably 14, where they can comprehend why they're doing this and what they're getting out of it. But the DNA and epigenetic is like a piece of cake. You have to run it once in your life because your DNA and epigenetic and genes don't change. So that's really, really simple. And then we can be, again, a little bit more active.
Do you have the melatonin and serotonin? Is that what you said?
Melatonin and cortisol?
Do you have something on video with that?
I do, yeah.
So I can show my kids, like, I'm yelling at them at night to go to bed.
Yes.
And
Cortisol. I'll give you this. What's the cortisol?
This is why I'm telling you, I never thought about this before. This is valid. Anybody else put that one?
Right here. Oh, thank you. So I'll give you a really easy framework in which you can run off of this. And Sharon's a big proponent of this. He loves this one. So it's called the 3-2-1 rule for sleep. And this is the best way to optimize cortisol. And so 3 hours before bed, we go no major meals. 2 hours before bed, we go no more major decisions or no more work. And then 1 hour before bed, no blue light. And if we're able to simply work off this framework and we have a steady, consistent sleep time of say 10 p.m., could be within 30 minutes. What we can start to look at here is, okay, 7 p.m., no more major meals. 8 p.m., no more food or work. 1 p.m., no more blue light. Why? When we have 300 times more melatonin produced in our gut than we do by our brain. And so the moment you start to take in food under that 3-hour window, what starts to happen is our body goes into a sympathetic response, dropping our HRV, rising our cortisol levels because it has to now digest everything that's here. So it's not only shunting the melatonin that's released from our gut, but it's also putting us in a greater sympathetic state, which is going to decrease the melatonin release and increase the cortisol release. And so we're not going to get into those deep stages of sleep. 2, no more work, same thing. When we start working and processing information, increases cortisol, decreases melatonin, increases sympathetic tone, decreases parasympathetic state, which again minimizes our effectiveness to get into deep stages of sleep. And number 3, blue light, for every 30 minutes of blue light exposure, decreases or prolongs cortisol in our bloodstream and prevents melatonin release by up to 60 minutes. So if we're having, say, if we're watching 2 hours of TV from 8 till 10, we can ultimately say there's 4 hours of melatonin release. So we're not going to get to peak melatonin release until 2 a.m. in the morning. And so all of a sudden, we're not getting into these deep stages of sleep, and the best stages of sleep happen between 10 and 2 because we get through these 4 stages of sleep, which are 1, awake cycle, 2, slow wave sleep, 3, REM sleep, and 4, I just go awake. here. Make it easy. Light sleep. These two are what matter. These are the quality stages, which are restorative. And if we can optimize these two levels, it takes 90 minutes to get through these 4 stages. If we can optimize the speed that we get from light sleep to slow wave sleep, and we want to ultimately get 50% of our total time, 7 hours, meaning we want to get 3.5 hours in that space, following this will get us as close to that as possible. And that is something that we can replicate. That's something that we can do just continually and being able to make that happen.
Just that one thing probably bumped our HRP like 15%, 20%.
And I'll say,
Just that one
yeah,
thing.
and I'll say too, the no work, for me, it has to be 3 hours. And that's when you're working with them, they get to know you and what is specific to you. And so I have a hard time shutting my brain off. So it's like no work, like before bedtime.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah.
And all of a sudden, the buy-in is what's there. That's a great thing I come back to is you want to create real change, you have to choose different. You can't be like, well, I really want to wake up really energized and feeling good in the morning, but I also really want to do work right up until the moment I go to bed. It's like, cool. Like, I don't even know what I'm going to say. I was going to create an analogy, but I'm not picking this one up my feet very fast. But you want to pour concrete and have like a really nice hardwood floor or a hard concrete floor, but all I have is grass. Like, you're not going to turn grass into concrete. You're not going to turn a poor night's sleep into a great night's sleep by doing the same thing. So, anything else? Questions?
Justin, you and I had a conversation about at a minimum that maybe the people in this room could get with you to get just the DNA testing or some simplified testing.
Yeah.
To just get them the basic information. I think a lot of people probably need to go deeper.
Yeah.
But at a basic level, is there a way for them to do that?
Yeah, so anyone here who wants to go through, we've got something put together for you guys just to dip your toe in, where it's your DNA testing and your cellular testing, and just a single debrief after, meaning like, what does it look like? What does it mean? How do I take action on it? And we won't have the in-depth coaching that goes along with it, and kind of the hand holding is we kind of like really create that individualization, but at least you have the information that you don't know and can figure it out. But if that's, again, we can kind of get into that. But there's one other thing, just because I love this group, that I want to dive into, and this is when we try to figure out the equation for the best nap ever. And so what we want to do in order to do this, and naps are amazing, we either want to nap for less than 20 minutes, or we want to nap for somewhere between 75 and 90 minutes.
Yeah, maybe.
Why do we want to do that? One, because on this 90-minute cycle, we're going to spend about 15 minutes getting into this wake phase. But if we wake up in a slow wave or REM sleep often, we're going to have a high peak melatonin level, and we're going to be all confused and all kind of dazed. Who's woke up from a nap and been like, I just got hit by a truck and I can't start my day. And I got to go have a cup of coffee. And now it's 4 o'clock at night and I'm not going to go to sleep until 2 a.m. And so under 20 minutes, because we don't get into this state of sleep, but we do change our brainwave states, and we can actually trick our minds into thinking that we're in slow wave REM sleep, or 75 to 90 minutes, and we wake ourselves up just before we get into this wake stage. So how we figure out when this occurs, take your typical bedtime, so let's say it's 10 p.m., and let's take your typical wake time, let's say it's 6 a.m., and let's find the middle of that. So this is an 8-hour sleep, so middle of that would be 4 hours, which is going to be 2 a.m. We know that our circadian rhythm operates off of 12-hour intervals or 12-hour integrations, meaning our optimal sleep and nap time is 2 p.m. Who starts to feel that natural afternoon lull sometimes? Yeah. That is why, because what you start to have over the course of the day is you start to have your rising melatonin, or your rising cortisol. It'll be here, it'll drop naturally throughout the afternoon to signal. Why do you think, again, the US culture is absolutely backwards, but why do you think in Europe they have afternoon siestas? Is because they're following the natural circadian rhythm plan, which is also why, if you look at the average lifespans of people in the US versus people in Europe, they are average of 8 years lower. in the US versus Europe, which is why, because they handle stress at a higher level or at a better way, because they're going through this. So we see that little drop, and we see a rise, and then we see a plummet. And conversely, we see a plummet in melatonin. Over the course of the day, we see a little rise, a little dip, and that's what that proper melatonin cortisol curve looks like through the day. Now, what we ultimately get to see is if we take our nap in the afternoon, this starts to become a little bit more steady. So we start to have a steady energy source and energy stream throughout the entire day, which can, again, consistently be replicated. So, hey, you're going to bed at 11 and wake up at 5. Just shift your time zone or shift your time parameters. So 11 to 5 at 6 hours, 3 hours in the middle, I guess it would still be 2 a.m. But you want to move it backwards and it's 9 to 7 or 11 to 8. Just find that middle number, middle ground, go 12 hours later, and that's your optimal window, plus or minus 30 minutes.
That's when we should take a nap.
Yeah,
A 30-minute nap.
less than 20.
Oh, sorry, less
Or
than
75 to 90. I want to play this guy off. I want to play this guy in poker after a 30-minute nap. And I'm going all in on number 1. So, any other questions? We're good? Awesome.